Welcome, everyone. I think we're going to get started, and the stragglers can straggle, and it'll all be great. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Maggie and Kristen and Talat, for being here. It's a really wonderful merging of communities that's happening right now. I'm just going to introduce these guys, and they can take over and just give a little bit of background about Erie, the group that's putting this on tonight. It's a student group that started at CIIS and actually just celebrated Erie's 2-year birthday on Wednesday. So it's been happy birthday to us. I am a somewhat new member. I'm a new student in the master's program in East-West psychology, but if you have more questions about Erie, you can talk to me, sign up for our email list with the lovely Adrian in the front. There's another Adrian here, one of the founders. And yeah, it's a great team. Just to explain Erie's mission briefly. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that happening? Okay. Erie stands for Entheogenic Research, Integration, and Education. And I'm guessing most people in the room know what the word entheogen means, but if not, it was a term coined in 1979 by a group of ethnobotanists and mythologists to sort of take away some of the negative cultural connotations of the words psychedelic and hallucinogen. And so it means manifesting God within or generating God within, and it refers not only to the plant teachers, but also to any substance that's used in a ritual context. So we'll probably be getting into multiple levels of that. And entheogenic research, Erie members are focused on participatory exploration of the healing and sacramental properties of entheogens, both in the historical use and indigenous traditions, as well as in modern research contexts. Integration, this is a big focus for Erie, how we can foster community and dialogue around these experiences and support participants in journey work and really bringing this in a meaningful way and into their lives with supportive worlds here. And education, exactly what we're here for right now, just spreading the word and holding a vision for a time when this dialogue can happen more and more regularly and we can bridge Western and indigenous technologies in a fruitful way. And I'm grateful to be at CIIS and where this kind of future magic can really happen. And it's great to see people from my entheogenic shamanism class here right now, so yay. So second birthday, we have an upcoming on March 2nd, we have a entheogenic women's symposium. So mark your calendars, and also on March 3rd, we are co-sponsoring an event called Healing with the Kashinewa. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
A panel of healers from Brazil. So that's a little background on Erie. Tonight, we are discussing Eros and Entheogens, sexuality, psychology, and shamanism. I'm not going to read the introduction because it was on the internet, but I will introduce the panelists, and then I'm going to give them a little while to tell their stories, and we'll sort of open it up for questions and see where the group really wants to take this evening, because there's so many places we can go. So to start with Talat. Jonathan Talat Phillips' memoir, The Electric Jesus, The Healing Journey of a Contemporary Gnostic, has been one of the must-read books of the New Consciousness movement for its honest portrayal of life on the emerging edge of the transformational culture. Phillips is director of Talat Healing and its certification program, a co-founder of the cutting-edge web magazine Reality Sandwich and the Evolver Network. He created the Ayahuasca Monologues, Tales of the Spirit Vine, writes a religious blog for the Huffington Post, and is a soul surfer, life coach, and bioenergetic healer, holding Skype sessions for clients around the world and in the San Francisco office. And Talat, I think, is going to pass around a little sign-up sheet.
Oh yeah, can I say one?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys, I'm going to pass around a newsletter for the psychonaut stuff that I'm doing in Talat Healing. If you're interested in psychedelic anything, there's going to be some fun activities in there, so feel free to sign up.
Okay, thanks. And Kristen, a dear friend, Kristen Boyer, is the author of Playing Karma, a former church girl's true story from bondage to enlightenment. She's a shamanic practitioner with expertise in soul retrieval, extraction, chakra cleansing. She's really, really powerful and tuned in, this woman. I can say that for her. And she's also a professional dominatrix with a background in psychotherapy, creative arts therapies. If I can just, Kristen, call you a shamanatrix.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. That's what everyone calls me.
I've just been waiting to say that all night. Okay. She helps to liberate clients who feel stuck and empower them to reclaim their personal power through shamanism and roleplay. Her work as a dominatrix has informed her practice with the importance of acknowledging, healing, and integrating the shadow. Her website is kristenboyer.com. She has books available here. Kristen, do you want to add anything just on the publicity front?
Well, I can share a little bit about workshops I'm going to be running this weekend on power animal retrieval. I'm going to be running some workshops in Palo Alto this weekend. On Saturday, it's going to be a power animal workshop, and then on Sunday, it's going to be an ancestral healing workshop, which will be going really in deep to release any ancestral wounds, any legacies that are no longer serving us from our families, to be able to transmute those energies, remove them from our bodies, and be able to do a ceremony or a ritual to release them, to make space for what our legacies that we want to bring forward are. So I have some flyers here, so if you guys want to take notes at the end, I'll have this up here. We do have a few extra by the door, but we can talk more about that afterwards.
More transformative experiences. And lastly, Maggie Mayhem, welcome, thank you, is a sex worker, activist, and artist based in San Francisco. She spent many years as an HIV test counselor and clinic coordinator in Santa Cruz before she moved to the Bay Area and served as the HIV senior specialist at Larkin Street Youth Services. After grant work at the Bagamoyo District Hospital in Tanzania and disaster relief work in Haiti, she quit her job and went rogue. She's since been spotted as a featured speaker at South by Southwest, via Yale, Princeton, Farmhouse, Ars Electronica, and performer at kink.com, Crash Bad Series, Femina Potens, Naughty Natural. I love saying all of these. She's the star of the XBiz 2014 Feminist Release of the Year winner, Occupied, and has just returned from an art residency at the Museum Cortier in Vienna, Austria. Her website is missmaggiemayhem.com and Twitter at missmaggiemayhem.com. Do you have anything to add to this?
I'm happy to be here, and if you like seeing me tonight, I am also going to be performing at Body Storytelling on Wednesday at the Verity Club. It's been running for about 7 years now, a weekly show that's real-life stories about people's sexual encounters, and I'm going to be one of the storytellers that Wednesday night, so I'd really love to see a lot of you out there. I'll be telling a really, really dirty story. So I do that very, very well, and I always enjoy doing it, so it'll be even dirtier than what you hear tonight.
This will be a little preview. So I am going to turn it over to each of you to tell your stories of healing and sex work and shamanism, how they all intertwine, and then open the floor for questions. So we'll have just a bit for each person, and then thanks everyone for bearing with me, because I'm really nervous and not used to speaking publicly. Who would like to begin?
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I'll jump right in. So my name is Kristen Boyer, and as you know, I'm the Shamanatrix. It's like, where do I start my journey? My journey. I was raised fundamentalist Christian in the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Was taught to be this goody two-shoes church girl to fit into a role. And I found that trying to be in this role and obey my parents' wishes to not be punished or not thrown into the fire, so to speak, I was really hiding a lot of my authentic self. I ended up getting married a couple years back to someone who was a complete fantasy. I thought that they were someone who was going to help take me out of this role of being this goody two-shoes church girl and sort of rescue me from my family, who were very cold, judgmental. I just wanted to start over. And unfortunately, the way that that worked out is my husband emptied my bank account, fled the country, and I was left penniless, not wanting to go back to my fundamentalist Christian family in Pennsylvania. So I had studied psychotherapy, creative arts therapy, movement therapies, and I had worked with ex-addicts with mental illness in Bellevue Hospital in New York City. And I was finding that I was really good connecting with people and people who had experienced trauma. And as I was going through this very traumatic time in my life, some other friends and coworkers of mine saw my personal struggle and saw that I was literally losing my shit. And they said, you know, this is kind of weird, but have you ever thought about going to be a professional dominatrix, or acting out some of these wounds, or finding a way to find some more balance in your life with expressing these emotions? And so at that point, when I realized that I had lost everything in my life, I said, well, what do I have to lose? So I went into the dungeon, the commercial dungeon in Midtown, New York, and I brought in my resume, and I showed that I have history working with the mentally ill with chemical addiction, and I have history doing this, and the woman just sort of like ripped it up and said, who are you, what's your name, when do you start? And just before I was able to really think about it, karma came out of my mouth. I was to be karma. So it turned out I'm really good at holding space for really weird stuff to and by that I mean I'm really good at holding space for darkness and allowing the shadow to be seen. And although I didn't realize that's what I was doing at first, I was going in there and just connecting on a soul level, saying, who are you? What do you want? What are we doing today? Of course, having limitations and boundaries, talking about where we resonate with our work. I specialized in role play, medical role play to be specific, and became the enema specialist at the dungeon.
Love it.
See, my king, and the thing that I get off on, is to play the teacher, and to be able to have an audience, to train to do something very well, the right way, but have that authentic connection to each person that I'm training, or whoever it is that I'm playing with or working on. So, long story short, I'm in the dungeon and I'm working through some really deep stuff with my clients. And I'm finding that there's all of these patterns. And my clients aren't coming in with new role plays. They're coming in week after week with the same story. And I kept hearing it, wanting to play the same roles. Every once in a while you would have someone who would want to switch the role. But I saw that there was a disempowerment as a seed of that role play or that scenario that they were wanting to play out. And I saw that my clients were stuck and they couldn't become free. And what they were doing was they were having consensual play. We were talking about boundaries. We were creating a space where they could relive something that had a root in truth, that had a root in their early experience. And I can use an example of a man who came in who was sexually abused by his babysitter. Of course, he always picked me, knowing that I resonated with him, that I had had a similar history. And he wanted to play out the same role play where I was to make him touch himself or make him explore his body. And he always asked, and he was a really big salt and pepper guy. He had a really deep voice. But then when he wanted to talk to me, he wanted to talk like this. But he always said, I'm 15. I'm 15 in this. But he sounded like a little boy. And when we would connect, it would always be that this is okay, right? It's all right to do this. Trying to get this feedback and trying to connect with me on a soul level, on a personal level, because it was this replaying of something really difficult. But we were able to create a space where it was safe, and that we were able to move with that energy. And it was okay because there was consent, and I wasn't harming him. And so I found that I was also playing in these roles. And my role was that I had felt so disempowered by the fundamentalist Christian church, and so disempowered by my really cold, judgmental family. And I was feeling really unloved and unsexy from this person who I trusted, some time with in my life and trusted my heart to, who completely broke it, feeling like I wasn't worthy of that connection or that I had lost my power somewhere. So I was working with these people, trying to embody just the opposite and saying, I'm powerful and I'm sexy and I have control over you. Because really, in my personal life, I feel like I'm out of control, and I have no control at all. So to play that got me off in the moment, and it was really empowering to play that role. But at the end of the day, I would still go home and cry. I would still feel vulnerable, and I'd still feel like I'm still alone. This really sucks. And I can't change the fact that this is where I'm at. And I can play with this all I want, but where's the liberation? So luckily for me, the liberation did come. After I worked in the dungeon for almost a year, I ended up going independent. And it was all of these synchronicities and these energies that were moving in my life, sort of pushing me away from the dungeon, pushing me away from the clients I'd worked with and really the administration. And I ended up discovering shamanic healing and a concept called soul retrieval. So I know that some of you are familiar with shamanism, especially plant shamanism, and that's sort of what binds us together today, these amazing experiences that we can have transcendentally. But I wanted to talk to you guys about a concept called soul retrieval, which is this idea that if we've suffered trauma in our life, that it's possible that part of our energy, our essence, can disconnect from us. And it can either get stuck in the body as a heart blockage, or this inability to speak our truth because someone took that right away from us early on, or at some point in our life that there's one specific moment that something shifts. It could be a really difficult breakup, and you just don't feel the same afterwards because it's like part of your heart's missing, or that ability to go out with confidence and to be able to have people see you and not be afraid of being seen, whatever that is. And I found that I was playing out these roles in the dungeon. I was playing out these roles in my life, trying to feel empowered, trying to feel in control. And when I discovered this work, I found that you can go back to these moments where you lost your power, and you can get it back. Through going into altered states of consciousness, you can connect with the essence of your soul that has been disembodied or disconnected from you, whether it's buried within and blocked because we're afraid, or whether it's going out and connecting with that moment that we were too afraid. So the work that I do now is to merge this with the psychotherapy work that I had been doing and framing my sessions with, knowing that if we play and if we go into the shadow, we're able to access these parts of ourselves, these dark parts that we're oftentimes afraid of or want to disown, and that we can connect to what that power is. And instead of having to play that role over and over again, trying to fill that void, we can get it back. And then we can integrate it. And then we truly leave with that power. So I'm going to leave you with the question of if you were able to go back to a moment in your life where you felt like you lost part of you and get it back, how would that shift the roles that you play? Thank you.
Yeah, you want to go? Cool.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maggie Mayhem, and I'm a hoe. I had a long... Thank you. It's always nice to get a good reception because it's not always that way. A lot of times it's like, you know, the pitchforks and the fire, and it's not good. It's been a long, strange path to getting to be a sex worker. And back in 2003, I was a bright and chipper 18-year-old, and I had a kind of surprise incident one day that led me to apply to be a volunteer HIV test counselor. And it was a little bit strange. I had been in a class where I was very influenced by a professor who talked about his background in AIDS activism. And I ran into this realization that I'd always known that you could use a condom to prevent HIV. I'd never realized really in any true deep way how many lives were lost to get to that piece of common knowledge and what an actual struggle it was, that it was the work of activists who got out there who died to give me that knowledge that was keeping me safe, that allowed me to explore myself in those early ways. I was still a teenager and I was still very nerdy and did not have a lot of game. And yet I felt a great debt of gratitude. And as I was walking home, I passed by a clinic that had a big banner, and it was asking for people to volunteer to be HIV test counselors. And there was 1 day left in the application period. So I took it as just, a little thing that I could do, didn't really expect that I would ever get called back. But for some reason they did. And I went through the interview process, and I got basically initiated into something that was going to change my life forever. And it was a series of people who said, we take very seriously who we let onto this team. And we deal with a lot of frank issues. We deal with people at their most raw moment. They're coming in to get an HIV test, and they're vulnerable, and they don't know who you are, and you are going to collect their story. You're going to collect their story about what brought them in to do this little process. And then you're going to go and look at a test result, and you're going to tell them whether or not it is positive, negative, or inconclusive. And then you're going to sit with them after that. So we need to get some things straight. Are you going to be comfortable with that? We want you to repeat after us. Fuck. Dick. He stuck his big fat baseball bat in my fuzzy dugout. Are you comfortable saying that? Repeat it with a straight face. If someone says that to you, you can't be fazed. And I kind of was like, well, you know, but I did it. I was really ready to just listen to people's stories. So the beginning of my sexuality was really complemented by just sitting back and listening to people, providing a non-judgmental space, supporting them, and giving them the best advice and information I could for them to achieve the vision they had for their life and their sexuality. Learning about harm reduction methodology changed my life, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and that day I realized I wanted to work in HIV, and I did for a very long time. I was really honored to do the work I did at Larkin Street Youth Services, though I did quit and give them 4 days notice due to some disputes I had with the ways that they worked. But I loved every interaction I ever had with a client. I love every story that I have been able to bear witness to. And they shaped who I am today, because that wasn't the media portrayal or the spin of what sexuality was. That was people telling me in 40-minute increments at a time what was going on in their life, and that was very powerful. I was also exploring a lot of different types of things with sexuality, but I still thought I was going to grow up to be a nice social worker. That really was going to be my path. I did some grant work in Tanzania because I'd done a lot of work with HIV. I was able to go and sort donated medicines so I could look and see what was a generic German version of Truvada and help match it up to help give people meds who might not otherwise have had access to it, just making the best possible use of resources. And I had a lot of instances there that were really life-changing. I did disaster work in Haiti, and prior to doing that, I guess maybe I had been acting out with my anti-authoritarian instincts, and even though I was the HIV senior specialist at Larkin, I had started performing in pornographic films at kink.com. And some of those are very hardcore. They are some of the extreme things. I have been cattle prodded in a sexual nature. I've been hung upside down, dropped into water, all kinds of the insane things. It's the sexual Olympics, and that's the kind of athletics that I enjoyed. And that was not a problem in my workplace there. But when I came back from Haiti, there was no jobs to be found, despite the fact that I had a lot of qualifications. So I had to suddenly learn how I was going to support myself very quickly. And sex work is what was going to be there for me. Once you cross that public river of being gangbanged on the internet, you can't just shove it back in. It's always going to be there following you. I also had a very strong activist instinct. I came up in an activist tradition and community when I was doing all kinds of different work. And when I would run into the challenges that you might face with being a sex worker, I didn't know any other way to deal with it other than activism. So I faced some pretty interesting things with things like Porn WikiLeaks, which outed 15,000 porn performers, past and present. It took it from a medical database. It was done in a malicious way, and it came up in a format that would say, Maggie Mayhem, born, and it would be my legal name, is a pornographic whore and hooker. And they even, after I spoke out and did some work connecting with labor unions, basically hacked my elementary school's Facebook page, found pictures of me like age 8 and 9 saying like, she's a future hooker, just really nice supportive things. They make you feel loved for the work that you do, the reason I get up in the morning. But, you fight it, you challenge it, because that's in front of me and I can't go on any other way than to go right through it. I've also done a lot of work with other altered states of consciousness because I had to maintain my strength and my ability to heal as a sex worker. I've done a lot of great work, and I basically apply everything I learned as a counselor to the sessions that I do with people. I enjoy it, but it's also something that can stick with me. And so doing my own entheogenic explorations and healing is a way that I basically cleanse my palate and I'm able to be there again for the next person. And it also helps me understand the transitional space and the narrative of sexuality that I provide. What I believe I do, basically, is stand outside the cave of someone's psyche, and I hold the rope for them while they descend. And I watch over them and I make sure they're safe as they explore their own interior. And if I start to think they're having trouble, I pull them back out and I make sure they're okay. But if I think they're doing all right, I might let them go a little bit lower or a little bit deeper and help be their guide as they go through that. I love that work, and I love introducing myself as a peer in healing because a lot of times people don't think that about hookers. It's a very marginalized identity. High rate of homicide, police issues, surveillance, a lot of legislation difficulties. I do a lot of activist work in that regard. I am trying to decriminalize because I believe that's the way to keep the people who do what I do safer. So yeah, I have a lot of things to share tonight, and thank you for bearing witness to what I have to say.
Maybe just make a giant group sigh just to connect, because these were great stories. I feel like I need a little palate cleanser before I even attempt to go in here. All right, so everyone, big breath in. All right, and now let's do an orgasmic sigh. On theme, right? Big breath in. Hi, I'm Jonathan Talat Phillips. I go by the name Talat. Mostly it's T-A-L-A-T. I know it's a strange name. I call it my Tony Hawk spiritual name. Spirituality is not working out to me so well anyways these days. Oh, I'm not even using the mic, huh? Okay.
It's all the way around.
There might be like a
Just get it over the back of the table.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
Still, I was projecting pretty well there, right? Here, I'll just stand up for a second, because I feel like, is it hard in the back to see? Yeah, okay. I'm used to standing at festivals. Yeah, so for me, you know, I want to be on the same level as everybody else, so. They have this saying, like healers have this dark humor a lot of times. Really good healers I find have much darker humor than new healers. And the saying goes, what do healers call a fucked up childhood? Initiation. And that was a really, you know, if I thought about the predominant thing of growing up, it was pretty much hiding. Hiding from the violent storms, the verbal abuses of my mother, and really, you know, soul retrieval stuff. I fractured. I went away and put up the walls and hid for a lot of times. And that could all seem negative, but recently I read this book by Malcolm Gladwell, David and Goliath, The Advantages of Disadvantages, and I kind of see another story coming to play here. One where I found imagination, I found a lot of resilience, innovation, ways to survive. And then later on, those things would come out in fun pranks with my friends, adventurous sports, all those kind of things. But I was so shut down. You know, they often say, like, rape is mostly a violent act. And in my healing work, I really find often violence is a sexual act and has sexual energy to it, if you feel into it. And we'll get more into that as I go through this little story here. So I was really shut down, speaking my voice, scared, gun-shy of talking to women. I remember being once on a date, and I was like valedictorian and prom king. I was kind of rocking it, but I was so shut down and scared, I couldn't do anything. And I remember this one girl just turning to me and saying, "Damn it, are you gonna kiss me?" And that pretty sums up my whole high school. I graduated with all these accolades, but when I look back on it, I was like, dang, all I wanted to do was get drunk and get laid. And I kind of did that in my 20s, and I did the kind of counterculture thing that was available at the time, which was drinking too much, hanging out at coffee shops, listening to Tom Waits, and kind of having dumb 20-something sex. you know, going around and having adventures, but it wasn't really conscious. And a lot of the things I did weren't really conscious. But I did end up, well, you know, there's not enough time for a lot of stories here. But after a dark night of the soul of doing a lot of media activism and Bush won the second election, I was like, oh, the planet is screwed. We need a paradigm shift. To my surprise, that happened on my 30th birthday, where I got together in community. This is why, thank you so much, Sarah, for putting this on in Erie. I just think getting together in community changes everything. We got together in community, I took some MDMA, got my butt on the dance floor, and just got out of my head for hours, finally. And I connected with this energy of just awesome, sexy people. And I mean, have you guys been to these? Yeah, you're San Francisco people. These Burning Man parties, it's just like the most sexiest, badass-y people, at least for one night or when they put on the gear. And you feel that energy. You're inspired by that energy. We lift each other up. And I literally felt that energy on the MDMA going through me until, poof, the lights turned on. And I started seeing energy fields. And that has not turned off ever since. I show a lot of my students how to see energy fields. I hear, I feel energy. The whole universe is energy, so it's very convenient that my experience happens to now match up with quantum physics, because it did not match with quantum physics for many years. So that began a little study of ayahuasca ceremonies, Santo Daime ceremonies, being trained in bioenergetics, energy healing, all these modalities. And mostly what I ended up discovering is I'd always suffered from panic attacks, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and it was what this thing I was calling the black bowling ball in my belly. It was just this kind of dark, anxious energy I always had from my childhood. And I finally kind of found this thing, this block, this energy consciousness. It almost seemed of a demonic nature when I found it. And I ended up discovering the Santo Daime, who is a ayahuasca mediumship church, oftentimes, and they work with helping the shadow to the light. Dark energies find their way back. You might even call them dark consciousness. And so I'd be in these ceremonies, and they were pretty wild. You'd have someone singing a normal song, a dark spirit comes through, and then there's suddenly, like, really bad posture, always, and just yelling, like, I'm gonna fucking kill you guys, gonna kill you, right? And the first time I saw this, I was like, oh my God, this is white people doing this. Like, this looks like some cool channeling thing you see in Africa. I didn't know they did this in America. But they would do these things where they would help this dark energy through, and then they would always, like, welcome the energy, help the energy. And then afterwards, they would call in the guides, and the guides would come in and help. For me, I didn't have much luck with the guides, but the dark stuff was very easy. And so that would come through for like 2.5 years. And they kept saying, call in your guide, call in your guide. And then finally at one ceremony, I yelled at like the main shaman guy in front of everybody and just said, there are no fucking guides. Don't tell me they're guides. There are no guides. But then on my 30th birthday, like a miracle happened. They said, call in your guides. And this thing, this energy came in through me and just started moving me like a Tai Chi ninja and pulling stuff out and healing me. And I finally connected with a guide. And I gotta tell you guys, if some of you probably had intuition, you had muses, you've had inspirations, some of you are probably sitting here having connected with your guides. That is a really beautiful passage to make. And it's like one of the best moments of my life. It was like meeting a soulmate. But you know what? It just didn't move the energy quick enough. And after 100 ayahuasca and daime ceremonies, how many people here have done ayahuasca or daime or, let's raise your hand. Yeah, I mean, after 100 times tasting that disgusting taste, sitting in ceremony for hours upon hours per hour saying, please, please heal me, I just kind of was like, fuck it, there's gotta be a better way. And that's when I discovered the miracle of cannabis. And out here in California, you guys really got it right. I mean, I get critiques because people tell me, like my friend, Carl, I just saw you move in. Where are you, Carl? I think Carl's here. Oh, he's back there. Carl says, how can I be a psychonaut? Because I stopped doing ayahuasca and pretty much just stick with cannabis. But one, I do smoke a lot sometimes. And two, I think it's a very effective medicine. And what I liked about it is it slowed things down enough so I could work with it and have a relationship versus being on ayahuasca's ride. And that's when I discovered yoga. Yoga and cannabis is like a miracle for some. Like, yeah. Who here has tried that? Let's hear a hoot or a... Yeah. Oh my God! Okay. That's like a whole modality Carl and I are working on developing. But it opened up things so much quicker. And that's when I discovered what I called Psychedelic, tantric healing through psychedelics, mostly through cannabis, because that's what I could hold space for. And man, the first time we did it, we smoked up. I hadn't smoked in a long time. And my girlfriend and I at the time, we just fell into a full-on panic attack and swore we would never do it again. And you know, I think in learning this stuff, you got to appreciate the art of a good wipeout. Screw it up. Second time, very good, muy bueno. And I have been working on breath work, qigong, connection, eye gazing, connecting with your heart, connecting with the other being, feeling the energy flow, and most important rule of all, just get out of your head and into your heart and your body. Have fun, open your heart, and hold love. And then began the sci-fi journey of my life. I would just see all these colors and lights, and they would come in and tickle and illuminate the shadow and lift it up instead of fighting it. Same as in my yoga practice. Instead of fighting the shadow or like you just meet it. You blow light on it and it goes up. It's quite incredible. I kind of got over having to orgasm every time because I noticed all the little orgasms, the blue little colors here, the whites here. Men, if you haven't discovered your root chakra and going in there, I can't suggest it enough for opening up the root chakra, going in and like pleasuring yourself through the anal cavity with loving and gentle ways. I see some guys freaking out because I just opened up this whole electric circuitry for me. So all of that happened, and then I started watching these big wave surfers and how they were using technology and new devices and really finding your edge to accelerate the giant waves you could ride. And I was finding that same work in my healing work as I was riding bigger waves through plant amplifiers, through technologies, and also through sexuality and sexual experience. Since this is about psychedelic, I'll just focus on that for a quick minute before I end here. It's an entheogens and sexuality thing. One huge healing thing for me, doing the psychedelic stuff and really using cannabis and a lot of energy healing. I did learn a lot of tantra, but I'm also a big fan of DIY models. I really feel like our healing modalities are put way too much into people that don't have our interests, like Kaiser Permanente and Pfizer. So like anything that we can bring back in. And of course, tantra people aren't Pfizer, but I'd like to empower ourselves. I've done so many awesome tantric tricks. One time I had an orgasm and my guide came in and just started pounding on my heart and opening it. And I saw butterflies. You know, that doesn't happen to me in normal life. So DIY, learning yourself, I really recommend it. And we're going to talk about holding space and those things, so I don't need to go there now. A huge gift for me was gender role play. Because I had all these feminine aspects of me, I started having female guides come in and work with me, kind of like these goddess archetypes. They started opening my heart chakra, the hip area, and it really, kind of got me honoring how I wasn't honoring the feminine, how I wasn't seeing its power enough, her power, especially in this kind of monoculture, masculine culture. And it was great to be with a partner where sometimes I could be hyper masculine and then super uber feminine and like actually be a woman. And the healings that came on exploring my edge, blowing light onto it, and expanding it, articulating it, pleasure. And what I've found is pleasure is kind of a secret. If you just try to heal things, you're still trying to heal. If you skip to the pleasure, you've gone into the healing. And so now I really look at all my healings as pleasure experiments, bringing more pleasure into my client's life, bringing more joy and hope and love. Like healing actually has to be all the things we talk about. It's got to be fun, exciting, magical. And most of all, I think we have so much trauma, and hopefully later we'll get to talk about trauma. I think healing is often really sexy. Like if we really want to overcome sexual trauma, what's the way through that gateway? Well, it's actually living awesome, empowered, loving, really fucking sexy lives. And that's one of the reasons I'm so glad to be here today.
Thank you all so much for sharing your stories in such depth and detail. And is there some extreme sports that were It's amazing. Learning a lot. I have ideas, but I want to just turn the floor over for questions. And just to, when we don't have a mic that can move around, so if anyone who has a question can project, and we'll, whoever's answering can repeat the questions back. So the floor is open.
Yeah.
Oh.
Great stories, everyone. Really moving here. You had mentioned the term psychedelic, which I thought was nice. I'm just wondering if anyone can talk more about experiences with entheogens, tryptamine-based, or cannabis, and the relationship to sex more directly.
So one of the interesting things that I found with sex and acid is the way that they both seem to have a dilation effect. And sex in and of itself is going to have dilation everywhere. You have dilation of the skin pores as they open and start to sweat. The eyes start to dilate naturally because they want to take in as much pleasure as they can. If anyone has orifices, they do start to get ready to be more receptive and open. And a lot of that can be enhanced. Some people have different relationships, but I have had my own when I use it personally, and I've also had times when I've been lucky enough to help be a guide with someone who is mixing them in a private session. And what's really interesting about that is a lot of times it's their first attempt. Sometimes people are looking for a particular guide who might be comfortable with someone who might just feel the need to be nude, to touch themselves, to maybe not have intercourse, but just start to enjoy sexual energy. That you can see a lot of phases that someone goes through, and it's interesting how they can reflect the orgasmic cycle. And so, in many ways, it feels like you're kind of working within a spiral situation as you're watching someone going through rapid fluctuations, as they go through different sexual phases, and as they also go through the rotation of the medicine they're taking. And I've seen very different reactions with that. One being that because they're open and receptive, sometimes they're able to take in more than they thought. And that's a case where, and this might be the one that gets some reactions, and I don't want to do it purely for shock value, but I've had a lot of success with people who wanted to explore anal fisting. And it was because they were able to finally be open and empathetic and have it not as a scary experience, but one of wanting to be as close and intimate and wanting to essentially have as much of me as possible and to kind of have that back and forth symbiotic relationship. I've also seen some people who really just have an experience where they want to cry, and they want to cry to someone who's nude, or where they can have contact with sometimes the breasts if they're maybe going back to more of a child regression. So it's really just being prepared to handle anything, but also being ready to be receptive and go with sexual urges that I think sets me aside maybe than as doing it as a professional rather than doing it personally or with friends. And that was kind of rambling.
I'll speak a little bit to that. I've worked with plant medicines, specifically cannabis, and with medicinal mushrooms, working with intention. And its intention is just so important because that energy can be moved in so many different ways. But if you funnel it and say that's into an intimate connection or opening up the ability to see deeper or to feel deeper into your partner, it can really open the doorways for you to relax and realize where you're stuck in your body, or where you're stuck worrying, like, where are my legs, or where are my arms, or do I look sexy like this, or what am I doing? And oftentimes we're not fully present in our bodies, and merging with the medicine, asking that we're able to really embody a full experience of union, being able to go in there and release trauma and induce visions, and are my guides going to come through and help me to release these blockages that I have? And being able to communicate, and it's not always verbal, but oftentimes just staring into the eyes of your partner and connecting with them to be able to see where they're stuck, and opening up a dialogue or moving intuitively with the medicines into those spaces of stuckness to be able to identify and show them love and connect and begin to integrate them. And I know I had this one experience that was so beautiful on cannabis, and I was able to release these layers of sexual abuse where I was able to sort of hear messages from my guides saying, why are you so stuck? Why are you so tight? Feel it in your legs, breathe into that. This is a person that you can trust, and breathing into that space. And I actually got this vision of a walrus, and he was holding on to these balloons. And he had these red balloons, and I'm like, what the fuck? There's a walrus right here, and like, my partner's going down on me, and this is really amazing, but like, walrus, why are you here? You're here for a purpose. And he said, trust and let go, because you're holding on to your past. And you don't need to bring your past here, because this person is trustworthy, and you set intention to be safe and to explore your sexuality. And I was able to see these balloons just go, and they were able to move up. And then it was like an hour later, the walrus came back. Walrus, why are you here? That was really good. I was able to let go. And he shows me a white balloon and says, now you've regained your purity. It's as if the trauma has not happened because you were able to detach and let it go and move away from your body with your breath and with this partner to take you there. So, thank you for that question. Bring it home.
Anyone else want to own up to doing acid and sex at the same time? I don't know how. I do not know how you people do it. You are psychedelic iron men and women out there. So of course medicine is key, and knowing your medicines. Probably best not to jump into a sexual activity with someone you don't know well or without having tried the medicines yourself, and probably good to know that partner well. Obviously in transformational cultures, which I run in, there's all sorts of issues of people using psychedelics in kind of unsavory ways, predatory ways. So it's really important to choose your partner well. I think that's the most important thing you can do. And get to know each other, have intimacy, have safety. A partner that holds all your different multi-dimensional aspects, and I feel really blessed in that regard. Like, they can hold your 7-year-old, they can hold your diva woman, your like actual responsible 38-year-old male one that I think most women would want from me, or a lot of them would if I'm normal dating. If they can hold all those components and not judge them, you've got a winner there. And if you both can do that, wow, the party's ready to begin. So that's an element, but you're always with your best sexual partner, right? Like, I'm the go-to the rest of my life. I don't know what else is going to happen and where life goes, but I do know this person gets to live a really dynamic sexual life. And so it's kind of weird. Like, I remember I was at a festival once and I was flirting with this girl, and she's like, yeah, I don't think we should go home together. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And she was totally floored. She's like, but don't you want to? I was like, yeah, sure, but you know, it's no big deal either. Oh, but you know why? Because I knew I was going to come home and have amazing sex with myself. It's just that way. And so I think Psychedelic begins at home with yourself, learning what you love, finding out where your kinks are, how, like, practicing the energy, practicing the breath, practicing the self-love so that you can bring it out. Now, one issue I've really had when opening up to Psychedelic is, you know, I really can't talk about trauma and adventure and pleasure without talking about adrenaline. Because sometimes you get that adrenaline kicking in and it almost comes in as fear. Or it'll come in as a no. And I'll just see the no. Know when a no is really a no, and when a no is just a blocker that's like, because sometimes my no would come up and it would just be lack of confidence, old issues, old patterns. And then I'd be like, wait a second, this is the funnest thing that could ever happen to me. Yes. And as soon as a yes clicked on, the other person clicks into yes. So for me, with entheogenic sexual experiences, and honestly this is for me in life in general, a policy, a soul surfing policy of yes and. It's an improv comedy trick, makes everything work. It lets the energy flow instead of saying, no, I don't like that, no. You can adjust, you can move, but there's never a no. It's a yes and. Ooh, I like that, and let's do this. and let's do this. And next thing you know, you're hanging off the chandeliers being like, how did we get here? And that's really the power of yes and, is it's just so abundant.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'll take the thing. Okay. I'm really happy that you talked about just being clear on your own, like being comfortable in your own sexual energy before engaging or in conjunction with engaging with another. And I think it's just worth talking about boundaries. And I mean, shamanism and sexuality are both based on relationship, on balance and exchange. And in both experiences, you're really like merging with the other. In ceremonial spaces, there's a lot of taboos around sexual activity before or after ceremony, and even if you don't touch another person, there's darts flying around and all sorts of things happening. And so how does this idea of reciprocity and exchange, both with another being, or Kristen, in your shamanic work with the spirit, guides, play into these encounters, and how can we both protect ourselves and be open and use discernment, and how to navigate this, particularly as sexual healers?
I love boundaries. Boundaries are really important. It's good to know where you begin, the other person ends, before you go into that merging. It's really important to know what it is that you want to get into, and to be able to say that up front, this is what I'm comfortable with. This is edge play. I could be uncomfortable to this point, but we need to build trust and say, this is what's good for me, what's good for you, what are you looking for? And that was what I would do with all of my dominatrix clients. And now what I work with in my shamanic healing clients, and sort of merging some of the two at times, is just to see, where do you want to end up? What's your goal? Where are you trying to, what's your intention for today? Do we want to go into childhood stuff? Do we want to go into the sexual stuff? But let's give it some boundaries and a container to be in. And with my own personal boundaries, I like to see a container in between us and create that so that anything that comes through is going to be playing out in between. And that I'm not going to take on any of your stuff, because I have my own stuff. I'm not going to project that onto you, but we're going to dance with it and sort of evoke that inner child or that inner lover or their inner maniac and bring it out and sort of move with it in that space, just allowing it to be and be seen. And safe words are really important too. Safe words for communicating and sort of setting those up before you go into any play. And my favorite ones to use are green for this is good, but you never ever have to say it. Yellow for slow down. And red for stop, this is too much. But if you're really playing and you're really in tune and you've discussed the boundaries, I've never heard a red. If anything, I've heard a yellow, or one of my clients use really to slow down and really, really to stop. And so knowing what the other person's limitations are, knowing what it is that you want to get into, not crossing over your personal boundaries, but being very confident about what it is that you want to get into in that moment really helps to set up so that you're not being pulled by some other person's enthusiasm in that situation, or not being pulled into their stuff to say, okay, this is where I stand and this is where I'm comfortable. I think that's it.
I also love boundaries, because I think when people come to me, they not only come for the time that I provide, but also for the boundaries that I have from my work. Because what I do is not necessarily legal. The boundaries that I have from my screening help protect everyone that I see from any law enforcement issues. So it's very necessary for me to have very clear boundaries about that and how I handle that type of information and who they are. It's also about my personal boundaries. Someone is going to make sure that I'm able to be ready and prepared to see them wherever they're at. And so I want to be as resilient and open as possible. And that means it starts from the moment I wake up in the morning, when I take the time to eat a healthy meal. Like, I will absolutely observe very religiously what I need to eat that day. Make sure that I'm very on top of my hydration, make sure I'm on top of my rest. I like to take a long bath. You know, I like to make myself ready to see them so that I'm, you know that I'm in a ritual space, that I'm in a sacred space for what I'm providing, and I'm 100% present. And then when we exit, I make sure that they're in a good, clear place. You know, I check in with them. And then when I come home, I also want to debrief. And I like to, again, take another long shower or bath as a way to kind of clean off who they are, to get back into my own scent, to snuggle with somebody that I love, to eat more food, and to think about what I did really well and successfully with that individual. I like to take like a little brief note so I can remember them next time I see them, depending on what territory we explored, where we went, where they might want to go farther, where they might want to scale back. All of that makes me ready to see them again next time and to be healthy and happy when I see them. Essentially, someone is supporting me to prevent my burnout so that I'm always ready to be my best when I see them. And those are boundaries, and they're really awesome. Those boundaries also include how much contact I have in between times. A lot of times you have people who want to have a lot of in-between session contact, and I have to be clear about that, again, so that it can be a sacred space when I engage in it. If I'm just on the fly going to a coffee shop, I am not in a headspace to receive it. And so I won't engage in that type of communication at that time, because that's going to grate, because it's going to come basically from my social energy. So I'm really, really self-aware of where I am, and basically I just do a lot of good body care and a lot of good food.
I feel like they answer that really well. I deal with this in a different sense, because I'm not doing sexual work outside of my partnerships. And there are the boundaries in bioenergetic work, are they really pretty there? You know, and it's, in some ways I get very annoyed with the old clinical model, because it's so clinical, it's so dead energetically. And then you're trying to get someone to get their sensual energy back, and yet they're expecting it to be a clinical model. And that's why I just started calling myself a big wave surfer. I'm just helping people surf cosmic waves so that we can then approach sexuality in interesting ways and go there energetically to some degree. I'm not necessarily using my sexual energy that much, except in a heart-based way, but finding ways to help them open, finding avenues. There is a thing about boundaries too. I love how practical you guys are on these. And I also work with energetics, so there's kind of energetic boundaries, which I think you were talking about too. Sometimes those boundaries are walls though, right? The walls that block ourselves off, cut us off from other people. So we work on kind of de-icing them, getting them to flow, doing that. And then other times people have no boundaries, so I work on getting what I call the Star Trek version. Because a lot of people have boundaries of like in medieval times, you know, these energetic walls, their bodies are all crusted up. It's like a knight, if they fall down in the swamp, they can't get up, that kind of boundary. And what I really like is really high vibe, extremely positive, flowing, vivacious energy, and an awareness, which you guys are talking about, and those fused keeps you out of complicated situations. I feel like every day is an experiment. Every morning, every breath, like you're saying, you wake up and we get to practice boundaries. Like maybe everyone here could even sit for a second and be like, what are my boundaries with my boss? You know? What are my boundaries in this relationship, or with my mom or my brother? Because these are all there too. And whether we want to believe it or not, often there's sexual energy where you least expect it. When I finally help show people, I never show them, the sexual energy in a family line, in a brother-sister relationship, it's just such a freaking relief. It's horrible to say at first, and then we were kind of like, oh, of course, that was it. And then this thing that was just stuck for so long, the unvoiceable, it's out of the shadow, it's right there, and then love comes back into play.
Am I the only one?
Well, I know that you had your hand up before.
Yeah.
So you're talking about ritual and boundaries in a professional capacity. Well, let's take it home to a relationship with a lover. So how do you incorporate that? Do you have boundaries? Do you do ritual with a personal lover? Or?
Yeah, I do a lot of ritual with a personal lover, and just talking about what is it that we want to get out of this experience. Let's be on the same page. And oftentimes we're not on the same page, and that gives us the opportunity to come together and meet both of our needs. And it's always speaking before and especially after. What worked? What did we both vibe with? How has this shifted? What didn't work? And what can we work on next time? So it's honest communication constantly. And I find that that's the best way to really connect in my personal relationships and to make sure that I'm able to go further. Because oftentimes I'm getting to a point of either, like I have lots of like sex visions, and being able to say, okay, keep doing this, I'm moving into this, and saying, I'm being present with you in this moment, but I'm also retrieving information through this experience and being able to bring them into that so that we can be partners in that. So it's not just, oh, I'm sort of checking out into the spiritual aspect, but I'm bringing us through this and bringing my partner into that, whether that be with Kundalini energy, moving through with Egyptian sex magic, which is a little bit that I've begun working with, but passing the energy back and forth and creating that biofeedback, and then being able to sort of speak about that, put it into words, and then also move with it when we can't use the words. I feel like I may have lost some of you guys with that, but I don't know if that answers your question. Thanks.
On a physical level, I always like to be aware of what type of boundaries I have. When I'm working with someone who I'm personal with, I'm more willing to have raw contact, and that's something I've had with very few people in my life, very specifically because of love and intimacy. With anyone else, it's a very clear feeling for me that there is going to be a physical barrier in between us. And that is, I think, a ritual difference, and that's a pragmatic and a practical thing. Emotionally, how I deal with boundaries is I think it takes a lot of radical self-awareness to make sure that you're having the sex that you want to have. It's very easy to fall into traps where you start having the sex that you think your partner wants to have, the sex of obligation, the sex where you're not really present. And I think personal boundaries are about taking serious inventory and looking about what you actually feel like you want tonight and what you're ready to take on, and feeling that you're able to communicate that to a partner and have it be heard and have it known that it's not an attack and that it's not a rejection. It's just an announcement of where you're at right now, and where you might be able to be a little bit later on. And that's something that's hard, and it takes constant vigilance, because those are things that shift from moment to moment, second to second. It can be a blood sugar difference. It could be some jackass you ran into in traffic and you haven't let that go yet. And you don't want to start being intimate right now while every single muscle in your body is tense and all you can think is like, I hate the world, I want to burn it. And you don't want to go into an intimate space right then. You want to actually be able to let it go and be able to be present with your partner. But I think we very easily sleepwalk through our life, and I think we very easily sleepwalk through our sex lives. And taking the moment to wake up, I think, is a really beautiful part of boundary setting.
I don't know though. I love what you said. I totally agree. But then when you were talking about the traffic, I was kind of like, I wonder if you could have like a really wild sex romp just to get that energy like flowing and like, whoo, you know.
Yeah,
but
that's the sex you want.
Yeah, but that's the sex you want. Yeah. I agree with the boundary stuff. I just one thing I'd like to add is creativity. I mean, I'm an artist and a writer, and I just love getting excited about weird shit and then doing it. Like. And let's do another, I love hand thing. Who here has done role-playing before? Raise your hands. Hi. Wow. Well, okay, so are we in those that, can we hear like, if you enjoyed role-playing, can we make a sound?
Woo! Woo!
Those that do not, I think you're in for a real treat, especially if you're monogamous, because suddenly you get to see your partner in a totally different way. It's still them, but now they're the record executive. They're Genghis Khan. they're Wesley and the Princess Bride. It's like whatever you want. And then suddenly, it's just the quantum field opens and the possibilities are endless. And, you know, as long as you're doing the communication that they're talking about. But that's why, like, maybe even before boundaries, talk about excitement. And then the boundaries can come in. Because you've got energy, you've got feeling, you've got flow, you've got excitement, and then you're probably going to have a fun time. But I do agree also making sure the consensuality is there.